Hi everyone, this is Giuliano Macciocci, Head of Product at eLife, and I think we'll just get started. So thank you all for joining us today. The reason for today's call is really to give everyone a chance to give a brief outline of what open source project they may be working on for the benefit of the research community, and to serve as an opportunity to start new conversations and hopefully collaborations that can go on after this call. So thanks again to everyone who's put themselves forward to talk, and I'm now going to hand this over to Cora, who's kindly agreed to moderate this call and will keep us all on schedule. So Cora, over to you.
Thank you, Giuliano. I'm Cora Korzec, and I'm a community manager here at eLife. And as Giuliano mentioned, I will be trying to facilitate this call. So please refer to the open agenda. If you want to share a project and didn't get a chance before, please add yourself to the bottom of the document, and we'll see if we should have another call. I think we already have more speakers than we will be able to present during this hour, so another call is very likely to happen. To volunteer to host the next call, please also go ahead and make a note on the agenda. If anything is unclear, please use the chat box on your right-hand side on the control panel, or just email us at hello@elifesciences.org, and we'll try to resolve any problems that way. Please write your comments and questions about any of the presentations directly on the agenda in the column next to the relevant item. And please use the raise your hand button on the right-hand side control panel to indicate if you'd like to speak. We will be able to unmute you during the time for questions after each presentation. Now to the speakers. We will ask every speaker in their brief 5 minutes to introduce themselves and present their work. We will allow up to 2 minutes for questions after each presentation. Please forgive us for this, but we will need to be quite strict about timekeeping. So now I would like to ask Dan Whaley to speak on open annotations, please.
Hi there. Thank you so much. I'm looking for. Okay, let's see how this goes.
Okay, Dan, I think you would have received a request to show your slides, and we can see them now.
Yeah, okay, you can see them, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put this into present mode. Let me know if you can still see them.
Yes, all works perfectly.
Okay, great. Hey, everybody. I know most of the or many of the folks here, I guess I would say. And so the folks I don't know, nice to meet you. Looking forward to your presentations. Quick update. I think most people are generally familiar. Hypothesis, our mission is to enable a conversation over all knowledge. We are a nonprofit based headquarters San Francisco, but based kind of globally, as many of you probably are. 16 full-time staff focused completely on annotation. We just some numbers updates as of this morning, have about 2.7 million annotations made by about 125,000 users, growing very rapidly. In the last year, but we crossed the 1 million in February and of last year, and the 2 million in October, and on pace for about 6 or 7 million by the end of 2018. 20 million user sessions distributed about the way that you might expect. And our mission really, and our kind of the way we go about this and think of ourselves, is to provide shared neutral infrastructure, some of which we'll host, some of which we won't, to enable best of breed open source implementation for annotation that can't be sold off and privatized, and really to align ourselves with users and partners over long time periods based on the notion of layers of annotation that can persist over documents, books, articles, etc., for a variety of different public, private use cases, hosted in any any location. So different layers can come from different servers, all based on W3C web standard which passed last February. And this is kind of how it might look. This is how I should say it's starting to look. I'll talk a little bit more about some of this later, but basically these different layers from different servers can kind of flow into a universal annotation client that can live in or around documents. So that, in the same way that you might have a desktop email client, you can be pulling, listening for different conversations from different places. Happy, of course, to announce our first partner launch with eLife, which was really an absolute pleasure. A ton, and the key innovation here is that publishers can start to run their own custom annotation layers, inviting authors and reviewers and so forth into layers that they control and can moderate and so forth, that can tie into their own authentication systems, host their own private namespaces, and so forth. So there were a ton of innovations that we worked on together to bring this about, including the notion of publisher groups, an OAuth implementation, the concept of a third-party namespace, so all completely separate user name scheme based on whatever they happen to have in place, tools for moderation, a whole suite of UX customizations and tweaks that can be packaged together in themes or toggled individually that let the experience really flow with the content that folks have in place. We also finished support for EPUB, both inside EPUB.js and Radium, and are working now on groups, both open and kind of read-only groups, and then full support for independent annotation servers. Things that we're looking out at, our own ORCID integration, eLife did theirs separately, a whole suite of notifications for people, authors, when their work is annotated, and better notifications in groups, pre-moderation, all kinds of review structures, structured annotations and then controlled tags and vocabularies. And the last thing I wanted to mention is great minds think alike. As this was coming together, we've also been talking to many of you about what we're kind of calling a joint roadmap for open science tools that would bring together nonprofit open source projects that have a particular focus or benefit in scientific research. I start to share user stories that span projects, identify specific opportunities to do joint development, align APIs, features, capabilities, etc. And then out of that to start working on a roadmap that outlines these at the same time that we get started implementing. Some of the folks here on the call, Coco, Dat, Wikimedia, eLife, CrossRef, Editorial, Meta, Project Jupiter, etc. Open. I'm hoping some of the other folks on the call might be interested. Please reach out to me. We're going to get an organizing call together here shortly, and maybe target a workshop in the April timeframe.
Right, thank you very much, Dan. I'm afraid that you have sort of used up your time for questions, but
okay.
Please, if anyone has questions for Dan, please put them on the agenda, as we said before, and this way he will be able to respond to you. If you would put your initials or your name next to your comment, then it will make things easier. And now I would like to invite Michael to tell us about quite a number of different initiatives. Michael, over to you.
Just setting myself up. Can anybody see the screen?
Yes, it's all here and clear.
Perfect. Yeah, hello. I'm Michael, and my partner Oliver from Substance. Say hi. Hi. And we are a company based in Linz in Austria, and we've spent like the last 7 years on working on web-based text editors, basically like professional text editors such as Google Docs or something like on open source land. And what I want to show you is several projects that we're working on. And at the very heart is this scientific editor called Texture, which is basically a collaboration between multiple organizations. There's like eLife involved, and ROD and PKP and Cielo currently. Also Stencilla project I will talk about later. And it was kind of like developed over the past 2 years and co-funded by those organizations. And the idea is to basically reduce the typesetting step or eliminate the typesetting at publishers. So basically that they can use a visual tool to improve the documents and set the metadata, etc. So just to give you a little insight, so you could edit the authors and assign you can assign affiliations, and these will update in the document. You have basically the whole so what's important here is like underneath there's the chats document model working. So each change you make here is going to be stored in a valid and very strict chats format. So that's very important for publishers to have that. And you can basically also manage references, and the system basically takes care of labeling and kind of keeping the bibliography updated. So you don't need to do that manually. You can add new items. We have support for like a number of publication types, and we've had pretty good progress so far. So the next project, which is based on Texture as well. So Texture is meant to be a library for building scientific editors, and we've worked on this project called Stencilla, which adds reproducibility to documents. So you can add basically code bits. You can compare this to Jupyter, but in this case, you're really editing a manuscript, and you have like Microsoft Word like editing experience for the typical things. It's basically the same as the texture interface I showed you before. It's just enabling these interactive features. So this is a very interesting line. Like we just take some data, and this data is really included in the publication. So in a separate tab, we've got the data. And so this is like basically a combined interface of a like manuscript editor and a sheet which has the data, and you can do things like plotting and so on. But this is backed by Plotly, for instance, and it will also work with different languages. So we have like R integration and Jupyter and so on. So the whole idea of this project is basically bringing these different interfaces together and letting like the more coding kind of people collaborate with the more like people on the authoring side that are taking care of the text, which was so far like pretty hard. And I also wanted to mention, like together with eLife, we started this larger project called Reproducible Document Stack. And the idea is basically to take these publications, which consist of multiple documents and reproducible documents, and you can basically store them in a unified format, which we call a document archive, in short, DAR. And you could send this to the publisher, like eLife, and they could publish a reproducible version on their website. That would work like, it would look like a traditional article at first, and it's then like progressively enhanced, so you can basically start the interactive elements.
Right.
Yeah, I'm probably running out of time. So
Michael, yes, I was just going to say, I'm afraid your time is up as well. We might have the time for 2 questions now. So has anybody had a question? I've seen that Chris Holdgraf has been asking whether all the tools that you're presenting are open source.
Yes, everything is open source and MIT licensed, so you can do what you want with it and embed it in existing projects. Yeah, so that's exactly the idea.
Right. If anyone has any questions, I just wanted to remind you that you can at any point press the symbol for a hand raising symbol on your control panel, and we'll be able to unmute you in the next questions time. I think we are now up and we need to get to our next. So Matthias, it will be a pleasure to hear from you. You should be able to share your slides now with us.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, we can see your slides now. Hello. Hi,
Oh,
we can
brilliant.
hear you too.
Okay, I'll just get on with it then. Okay, right, so I'll just get this out of the way. Right, so I'm Matthias Pipari. I built this authoring tool called Manuscripts. It got to around about 100,000 downloads by sometime last year, and it's Mac only at the moment. One sec. I was going to go show this. Right, so it's a Mac-based authoring tool, and we got to around about 100,000 downloads by sometime last year. And we're making a change actually in this project in that we're going to open source the IP sometime later this year. Hopefully, in just a few months. It's basically awaiting certain just mechanical and legal actions for us to do so. And basically, what we're working on is to change it from being a Mac-based application to being a collaborative web-based application. And I'll show you a couple of kind of features that we focused on and kind of our approach to authoring with this. But basically, on the left-hand side in the screen, you see like this outline of the document. You can navigate even large documents very nicely with it. You have an internal citation tool. It also interacts with things like Mendeley, Zotero, papers, bookends, and half a dozen different interchange formats for citation data. There's an internal table editor. There's a template system and about a database of around about 1,300 document templates that you can use for validating the contents of the document. So, for example, at the bottom, you see one of these validations that some word count requirement is not being met by the document. So thinking is that these templates act as a sort of guide as you're writing complicated research documents. There's also a multi-panel figure editor in the tool that you see somewhere at the back of the left, and there's support for formatting equations. That happens with math checks and some nice text formats and so on. And it supports also formatting code snippets. Right, I can skip that, I think. But what we're really working towards is turning this into a collaborative environment, as I said. And one of the emphasis that we have on this is really focusing on analyzing data and making documents more reproducible. So we have built and making it more extensible. So we've built a plugin interface to the environment. So you can create like resolver plugins. In this case, there's a PDB ID being turned into a visualized thing over here. And I'm just very quickly going to show another example of a plugin that is actually runtime loaded into the environment. So there's a PDB ID that turns into a citation and bibliography entry automatically. So we store all the structured metadata at the background and format it nicely for you. And the other thing that we've been working on is basically being able to show basically create dynamic figures. So here there was some R code at the background that we changed a parameter on, and you're able to just change the figure on the fly. And this is actually using Jupyter at the background. So this will work with anything that has Jupyter kernels for really. We're going to probably focus on just a few of them for good level of support initially. And I guess the final point of this was that the documents are also versioned. So there's a local version history of the documents in very similar style to Git, except that you don't have to know anything about Git in order to use it. I think that's about what I wanted to cover.
Great, that's fantastic, and great timekeeping as well. Thank you, Matthias. So I wanted to ask if there are any questions, because we definitely have comfortable 2 minutes. So if anybody has questions for Matthias, then please do say it now. Okay, I can see that Chris is asking a question. Okay, no, he's just saying that.
Wait, can you guys hear me?
Oh,
yes,
yep.
we can hear you now.
Oh, cool. I didn't even know that audio was an option here. I was curious what you guys are using to run the code underlying. You mentioned that there was a Jupyter kernel handler. Is that something running locally, or do you guys have servers that are running that code?
Well, it's kind of going in 2 phases. So it's right now it's happening locally, and that's why this is not yet, that feature is not yet deployed. We're working on basically Dockerizing it so that basically you get virtualized images that are actually executing it, so that nobody has to worry about library versions and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
But basically the thinking is that this will work both locally and in a server-side setting, the same as the authoring right now. I didn't mention it, but it's right now it's a totally offline experience, and it will continue to be so even as we add collaboration features on. So we're very much, by the way, looking for people to collaborate on, especially at the plugin interface level. Obviously on other aspects of the tool as well, once the whole stack becomes open in a few months, but especially the plugin system is something we're working to work together with people.
Cool.
Right, thank you, Chris and Matthias. And so now we will move on, and we'll hear from Paul Shannon. Sorry, we'll actually first hear from Matt McGrath, and I'm really sorry about the order there. Matt, are you with us?
I will show my screen. Hopefully you can see a browser window with 3 links on it.
Yes, exactly, and we can hear you clear as well.
Yeah, hi. So I'm from Digirati. We're a digital consultancy, and we work in scholarly publishing, research data management, and on cultural heritage projects. And we provided some of the architecture and dev support for eLife Continuum. So what I'm talking about today really is annotation. We've been doing a number of projects with the Royal Society, National Library of Wales, and others, where we've been building tools that allow them to create annotations on IIIF content. So that's on interoperable image resources, using W3C web annotations as the data model. And as part of that, we've been building various tools that help us build those projects. And one of those is a lightweight, reusable annotation component, which we call the Annotation Studio, where you can pass in configurable models for what you want to capture and on the kind of content, on the kind of thing you want to capture it on. And it will render a user interface for you, generate the annotations, and then you can surface them up through any standard IIIF viewer. So it's a sort of reusable, interoperable solution. So rather than demo one of the kind of rich projects that we've worked on that maybe look like they're maybe more bespoke, I thought I would just do something with some other institutions' content. So this is an image from the Welcome Images collection. I'm pulling this in via IIIF, so this isn't a static image. This has just come directly from them in real time. And I can select a region of the image that I want to annotate. And our tools have various selectors. You can have points and rectangles and so on. So I've picked a selection of the image, and maybe I want to describe it. So I'm not a biologist, so I'll just put in here, description goes here. And then maybe I want to use some kind of controlled vocabulary to tag this. So in this instance, I've configured this to use the Library of Congress subject headings. So I might want to say it's something like ocular pharmacology, I'll say, which obviously isn't correct. And if I then hit next, I've got the option of saving this locally. So I've got save as work in progress, or I can publish this to an annotation server. We've also got an open source annotation server that supports W3C and open annotation models. So if I hit publish, this annotation has been created, and then I can go to an open source IIIF viewer. In this case, this is Mirador, which was built by Stanford and Harvard with some input from others. And I can bring up this annotation layer, and I can see you maybe see a blue box on the image. This is the thing that I just created, and if I hover over this, I can see that I've got a label which came from the control vocabulary, a link which in this case is just pointing to the fast ID from the Library of Congress subject headings, and the description that I just added. So it's a kind of round tripping from JavaScript client-side annotation capture environment to an annotation server, and then back to on a IIIF document in a standard open source IIIF viewer. So it's a kind of an embeddable tool that can be then used to build websites that let you capture information. And we've used this on the Royal Society project, National Library of Wales projects, and some others. So I'm happy to take questions if there's time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matt. Are there any questions for Matt? Please, I remind everybody that you can raise your hand or write the questions on the agenda.
There's one question on the agenda, which is, can just the virtual aspects on the left be reused, similar to Editorial?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again? Sorry.
Sure. Sorry, let me maybe read it again. And as Jen mentioned, it is on the agenda. So can just the visual aspects, oh my goodness, somebody's typing there where I can't see. Can just the visual aspects of on the left be reused, similar to what happens, I suppose, in Annotation?
Yeah, so the Annotation Studio is using OpenSeaDragon to surface the IIIF images, and then providing a layer on top of that that you can use for drawing boxes and adding content and so on to those images. And that's all reusable. And the panel on the right that has the kind of capture boxes, those are configurable, and you basically pass in some JSON that describes what you want to capture and how you want to capture it, and then it renders the user interface on the right. So it's all flexible. And we use it in other instances where it looks completely different. So I can quickly show, if you like, on the website, if I had an item open, and hopefully you can see on my screen, and I bring up an image, and this image is in a different kind of environment, and let's pick a different image here. So this is using the same component.
For that question. I'm sorry, we also noticed that
okay, that's fine.
Dan Whaley wanted to ask a question, but I'm afraid you will need to ask that through the agenda, because we'll need to move on to the next speaker, and at this time I am pretty sure it will be Paul Shannon.
Thank you very much.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Go. Right, let me find the right button. Just helpfully hidden behind the webinar thing. Okay, so I just want to talk briefly today about our new name for eLife Continuum, which is Libero. So with Continuum, we built an open source publication platform that powers the whole of eLife. So I'll just give you a little bit. Very brief background on eLife. So we're a non-profit publisher working in the life sciences and biomedical sciences space, but also we provide software for the publishing and science communities. So everything we produce is open source. We moved away from an online host for our publication a couple of years ago, and then last year in June we launched this new redesign of our publication platform, focusing very much on reusability in the software community, but also looking at things like readability and accessibility for our readers. And you can see here we've gone for a very responsive design, a very lightweight approach, which uses low amounts of site furniture, focuses on the content, allows the content to be downloaded quickly and consumed by consumers across the world. And this is an example of one of our more popular articles and how it lays out on different devices. So when we launched this last year, it was very popular. People really like the look and feel and the sort of high level of design that we've applied to it. So we've been since then working with people to try and help them reuse our software. This is where Libro comes into it. So Libro, as I said, used to be eLife Continuum. So if you need to find any more information out there, you can also look for eLife Continuum as we rename it. But the reason we went for the rename was that we're trying to rejuvenate it in a way that means it's a little more community developed and reusable by other organizations. So it's our open source platform helping all publishers do more with everything that they publish. And it's particularly built in a modular fashion so that you can reuse different components yourself, or you can use the whole system. We're using the highest standards in design and usability from our excellent product and UX teams. But because of the modern architecture of the software, it also provides machine readable versions of all our articles, and it completely runs on cloud platforms. At the moment, it's quite specific to Amazon Web Services, but we're working on improving not only our developer experience, but also the portability of the software by looking at things like Docker containers and so on, so you can use any hosting provider. I published a labs post. If you go to elifesciences.org/labs, you'll find a post on there about our actual costs for publishing, including a calculator. You can find out how much it might cost to run your own journal using our software. And so, as I said, we're trying to make it more community driven, more community maintained. We've been building it in conjunction with Digerati, who you've just heard from, and they're looking at offering a service provider hosted solution too for people that don't have huge technology teams, but anyone who does have a technology and the capacity to do so, they can have their own self-hosted integration too. So just looking at the current development roadmap for us. So we've got Libro powers the whole of eLife as it is right now, but because some of the feedback we've received is saying that it is quite eLife specific, we're looking at trying to make it a little more generic, so you can run multiple journals on one site. We're using all of the patterns, so we use a system called a pattern lab, which breaks out the look and feel into small atomic chunks that are reusable, and we're looking to share these between the eLife site and the new multi-journal website. Coupled behind that will be a lot more flexible API, a lot more flexible data store, so we can store different types of article that so we don't just limit into life sciences and so on. People can be a lot broader with what they're serving, and then you can see here there's the automation part of the publication platform. So this is where your typesetter will drop your JATS XML and all the images and things onto the FTP. It then gets parsed in a very specific way to your journal, gets stored in the data store and served out to the front ends. So what we're looking for right now is collaborators, both in the form of people for giving us requirements and ideas on where we could go with the roadmap, but also developers and people that want to help collaborate on the software and help us move this forward in a way that's very agnostic and community driven. So we've been learning a lot more recently from other publishers about new ideas and features that they want, and we're hoping to work with them to build this going forward. And that's it from me.
Right, thank you, Paul. So now we have a little bit of time for questions. So I can see that not necessarily a question, but Chris Holdergraf has had a comment. So we will unmute you, Chris, so you can have a conversation with Paul about what you think of that. Yeah, you should be now. We should be able to hear you now.
Sure. Sorry about that. That was not a very good question. It was just a note that you mentioned one of your concerns was like removing dependencies on AWS, which we've definitely encountered that with a bunch of programs at Berkeley and the Binder project. And we've sort of landed on something called Kubernetes, which is like sort of a layer of abstraction that exists above any one particular cloud provider. And it's been really helpful in allowing us to like not depend too much on any one of them.
Yeah, that's great. That's exactly the technology we're moving towards. We're just waiting for a service called EKS to come out from AWS, where they will host Kubernetes for us. But yeah, we've been talking to Google Cloud Platform and other providers. So it'd be interesting to share some of your experiences actually as we move forward. Thanks
I'm happy to chat more about it. We've been deploying Kubernetes for a class that has like 1,400 students in it for a couple of years now, and we've switched providers every semester, sort of intentionally. And EKS is on our short list for what's coming next, but we're on their like closed beta thing right now, and I think it'll be much better in like a couple of months.
Okay, cool.
Right, great. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Paul. So we will now move on. We will hear from Theodore Georgiev about Refind It.
Hello.
Hello, hi, we can hear you now.
Okay. My name
and your
is...
slides are on.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, my name is Theodore Georgiev, and I want to show you this tool which is called Refinder. It's basically a wrapper that's searching different reference databases. So you can search free text for references, just writing some phrase. This service is available as an API. Basically, gives all the results from different databases. You can see here from CrossRef, PubMed. All the databases are listed here, and it's very convenient because this is just a wrapper that's searching on different places and gives you the combined results back. Also from here you can reformat your reference string in different journal styles. So if you pick a journal, you get the reference string formatted in the style of the journal you want. The service is available as API and gives everything in JSON. It's open source and it's written in Node.js. So if you like it, you can use it. It's pretty much that from me.
Hello, Theodore, can you...
Yeah, it's pretty much that's it.
Okay, yeah, great. So I can see that there are some questions being put on the agenda for you, but I can't tell who's asking them. So let me read it out. A question is, you said this was all available. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, it was all available via an API too. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. You can see here there is a documentation of the API. So
okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. This is very quick. And let me just double check if there is no other questions. No, I don't see other questions. So thank you very much, Theodore. That was great. And we shall now move on to allow Joe Wass to take us through CrossRef event data.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Just switch that back to something less exciting. Hi, I'm Joe Wass. I'm from CrossRef. I'm introducing my colleague Christine Buski, who's just joined us. I'm developer of CrossRef event data, and Christine is the product manager.
Hello.
Hi there. So, yeah, you've seen CrossRef mentioned in a few slides previously. You may know us from identifiers such as DOIs, and you probably know we have citations and all kinds of metadata available. Event data is a new thing. It's a new service, and we're tracking how people use our registered content, that stuff with DOIs, out in the real world on the open web. It's an open service. All the data is Creative Commons, CC0, most of it, and all of the software that's running it is open source. We wouldn't expect you to run the software, but if you want to inspect it to see how it works, you can go and have a look. So the kind of stuff that we're looking at is when people are discussing articles on Twitter, discussing things on Reddit, but also stuff like data citations, links to peer reviews, annotations. We've heard a lot about annotations, mentions on blogs, and there's a few other sources that we're looking at. Wikipedia is another big one. So what we're doing is we're capturing links between various things on the web pages, and the articles that they're discussing. And we're running this service on behalf of the community. We see the value in tracking non-traditional things that are kind of like citations, but they're not citations. So we've got these initial set of places and agents we're running, but we hope that we can open this up so other people can contribute data into this. It's an open platform, and anybody who wants to collaborate is welcome to send data in. So we're running on this behalf of the community, and so the whole thing is transparent. The way the data is collected, processed, and then given to you is all open. There's open logs, so you can see how the data is produced, and you can also see complete evidence for every data point that we create. We've got a few tens of millions of data points at the moment. Unfortunately, we're in the middle of rebuilding our index, so I'd love to show you the API live. Instead, I can show you the live stream. This is not the product, but it's kind of fun to look at. This is the data as it's coming into the system. So you see, here's a load of Wikipedia pages which are referencing DOIs. There were some tweets I saw earlier on. There you are, they're coming through. So we're currently in beta, and we're heading towards production as soon as we can. We're looking for beta testers to come and use it. You don't need to register. It's free to access now when we get the service back online. But yeah, please try it out. Join the beta tester group, the Google group here. I'll send the links around, and it would be really good to hear from you. Just in case you're wondering what kind of data we're dealing with, this is an example of a Wikipedia event. It says the Wikipedia page here has a reference to this DOI on this date, and lots of other supporting stuff as well. Yeah, I don't know how we're doing for time, but happy to take questions.
Right, so thank you, Joe. And I wonder whether there are any questions. Can't see any hands being raised. Just to remind everybody, you can raise your hand and then we'll be able to unmute you. You'll be able to ask your question yourself. But I can see that Juliana is writing a question on the agenda.
You can see that.
Right.
Are we disambiguating between DOIs and URLs? That's a really, really good question. The answer is yes. There's a thing on each side in the subject and object position. And for the subject ID and object ID, we're using the best identifier. So when it's a CrossRef article, for example, we use the DOI. And in the subject position, if a blog has a canonical URL, we use that. But if you look in this subject and object metadata, if we found a web page on plos.org, for example, the PID would be the DOI, but the URL would be the PLOS article. I have a whole page about this if you want to read about it here. Yeah, I'll refer you to that page.
Right, I can see that Rusty also wants to ask a question. So Rusty, I'll unmute you now, and you're on. You can ask a question.
Thanks. Wondering if there's a sort of an API version or a way to display this data in other places other than your landing page. I'm very interested in how individual authors that hold the DOIs might be interested in tracking how their stuff travels around.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say the service we're providing is an API. That's what it is. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how people use it. The query API has various filter parameters. You could, for example, say the object ID, you could put in a DOI that you've authored, for example, or the object ID dot prefix. If you're a publisher, you can look for all the DOIs for your prefix. There's an interesting boundary between how flexible our query system is. I see kind of the main use case for this is that somebody would either issue kind of quick queries against the API, or they would issue bigger queries and duplicate large chunks of data in their own database for more interesting processing. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this. Some of the data in here is the field of altmetrics. Some of it is to do with data citation. There's quite a broad range of stuff. And yes, but also kind of interested in hearing from you guys if there's other filters or features that you would like to include. But I would love to see this data displayed on lots of pages.
Right, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Rusty, for your question as well. So we will now hear from Moran on software heritage. I believe Moran doesn't have any slides, so we'll just listen intently to the news about software heritage. Yes?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. So Software Heritage is an open source project with a particular preservation goal to collect, preserve, and share all publicly available software in source code form with all the development history. Now we have more than 82 million projects and more than 4 million unique files. Putting on the agenda the link to the website and the link to the archive where you can browse with the username and password I wrote in the notes, because it's still under development and we haven't opened it to the public yet, but it's in the next month we will open it as well. And we're working now on a new feature, which is deposit mechanism with open archives to deposit the software on in scientific software in the research center in Riyadh, the Hull in Riyadh Research Center. Until today, we only had the pull mechanism where we go and fetch the software source code, and this is a really new advancement in our roadmap. So this is all for me today. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Okay, excellent. So I just wonder whether there are any questions for. Oh yes, sure. Carl is asking a question, so no problem. We'll unmute you now, and you'll be able to ask your question directly.
Does this work?
Yes, yes,
hey.
Of course. Yes. Hi, Carl. So your question is, when version control history is available, do you preserve it? Yes, yes, we do. We preserve it for Git repositories, but also we're working on the Mercurial development history, and we do.
Okay, thanks. Maybe I'll follow up afterwards with some stuff that we should send you that another group is preserving, but we can follow up later about that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Right. Are there any other questions? We've got about a minute left. If anyone wants to ask any other questions of Moran, and I can't see any more, so I think we'll now invite Rusty Spiegel from the Open Science Foundation to talk. Now, Rusty, could you just clarify whether you will need to present any slides?
I don't think so. I mean,
okay, great.
OSF's so complicated and big that I don't think we have time to really get into it. I'm actually from the Center for Open Science in Virginia. We have produced an open source platform called the Open Science Framework, which the URL is in now the agenda. We're up to 80,000 users. We add about 500 or 600 a week, maybe 1,000 depending on the week. So it's growing really rapidly. The whole point of this platform is to provide a completely open source and collaborative way to conduct an open science research project. You can collaborate with your peers. There are open places to store data, public and private spaces. And the main thing I wanted to bring up in this particular call was I heard someone mention Kubernetes earlier. We've employed that for a long time now to build basically a modular system that allows other software platforms to connect to us in meaningful ways. So we want to provide an ecosystem around which you can build workflows that are research specific using the tools that people like to use. What I wanted to say in this call is that many of you have very valuable and interesting tools that could enhance research workflows either on their own or in collaboration with each other. We're very interested in participating in joint development opportunities to hook stuff up to our platform so that people can use the tools they're used to using. We already render hundreds of different file types. We support lots of different connective tools like Dropbox and Google Drive and things of that nature that allow people to keep their data where they want to. But we're primarily just interested in letting people know that we want to collaborate on extending the open source workflow, keeping it open, keeping it available for people who don't want to, lock in, and just trying to innovate around the way scholarly research is produced. So I encourage you to go check the site out. I'm happy to communicate with you offline if you want to learn more about how we build our add-ons and our collaborative tools, because we really kind of want to grow those partnerships this year. It's a priority for us. And I just wanted to make that case here in front because it's a valuable step forward, I think, in open science and open research. Last point I'll make is the eLife RDS is very interesting to us. We would like to help participate in that in any way we can. One area where I think we could be helpful is in the data storage part. So on the back side of a project, any place where people need to keep the data they're citing, we would love to help participate in making that available. That's all I'll say, because it's a tight time.
Great. Thank you, Rusty. I'm not sure if there are any questions about what you just said. I can't really see any. Let's give it a minute for people to try and type things or find the hand-raising device. But no, I can't really see any questions. So if that's all right, Rusty, we'll move on to the next presentation. Thank you. And we'll now hear from Kristen Ratton from Cocoa Foundation.
Great.
Yep.
Am I able to screen share? Great.
Yes, your screen is on.
Okay, great. Can you guys see my slides?
Yes, we do.
Excellent. Okay, great. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Collaborative Knowledge Foundation, or COCO as we're known to friends, we are a mission-driven nonprofit, about 2.5 years old, with the goal of building open source and open source community around really publishing solutions. Generically speaking, knowledge creation, production, and sharing, but specifically we are working on solutions that allow people to better publish books, journals, and now micropublications. Why is it not paging down? Sorry guys, my computer's frozen. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you. Just your slides don't move.
Yes, I noticed that. I'm not sure what to do about it.
Can you just continue talking through what you wanted to talk about?
There
hopefully.
we go.
Oh yeah, it resolved itself. Now we can see
Yeah,
the slides.
really strange. It's a new computer too. Okay. So we believe, similar to what Rusty was just saying, that we really need an ecosystem, that there isn't a single platform out there, and that in fact the idea of this sort of big box single platform has gotten us all into a lot of trouble over the years, particularly in publishing where we have something of a sector lock in terms of technology. So we built things that we're building in a very modular way. We have a component-based architecture, and we are working with a lot of other builders in this space to create interoperable modular tools that work together. We also believe the community has to own its own solutions. So in terms of the ecosystem, this is sort of the way we see them. We see a layer of frameworks, and there are a lot of them, and doing different parts of the overall research workflow. So, you know, OSF, Rusty was just talking about data and data storage and lab management. We are very much in the publishing space. The eLife Continuum platform is really in the delivery after something is produced and peer reviewed. There are lots of different tools that can fit into these frameworks and be used very flexibly. So regardless of where you're coming into the ecosystem and what you're building, we feel very strongly that there's room for a lot of collaboration and interoperability. And that means that people who are adopting any one of these frameworks, hopefully, should have available to them the wide range of tools that everybody's working on as well. Specifically, what we're building is we have this larger framework called PubSuite that in which the components can be mixed and matched to match different use cases. So for example, we have a books platform that is now launching. We have a journals platform that is underway and in development right now with our partners. And we have a micro-publishing platform to create very short and rapid publications that's in its early design stages. On the book side, the platform's called Editorial. We built it in collaboration with the University of California Press and California Digital Library. It's ready for adoption if anybody else is interested. All of our technology is open source, MIT license. The journals platform is called XPub. We have 3 early adopting and founding kind of partners for our community: eLife, Hindawi, and Collabora Psychology. That platform's in development now, and we're getting a lot of great contributions on the development side from eLife, which has been really nice. The micro-publishing platform's in its earlier stages. We're still designing it. Our partner here, our initial partner, is Wormbase, which is a model organism database, and they're representing the needs of all the model organism databases. So if you're a biologist, you'll know that that means flybase and zebrafish base and all sorts of bases. And this is really exciting because this is really kind of changing up the whole model of publishing by having much shorter, more rapid publications that kind of could add up to a long form publication, or could, you know, sit and on their own merits as a discoverable research object. So, you know, what does this mean if somebody's coming to us and asking for a new publishing platform? What we would like to offer them is more than just the framework and the tools we're building. What we'd like to offer them is a gateway to this larger ecosystem where they can plug in all kinds of really rich and interesting tools, many of which we've seen on this call, and create a custom solution that evolves over time. So a lot of the things that we're building are on the bottom level here. A lot of the things that we'd like to be able to see people build and make interoperable are in the bottom and the top layers. And we feel strongly that no one tool or one module is enough. We have to actually start thinking together as an ecosystem. And I want to reiterate Dan's comment about having a joint roadmap. We feel it's really important to be able to present to the broader community a kind of coherent landscape where they can see all of these things together. And then I'll just end on the note that our approach to this is not to just build something and hope people come, but to be very engaged with our community early on to build what we feel people will really use, and to make sure that we're working with the wider, broader groups of potential collaborators in terms of other partnering tech organizations, not just people who want to use our technology, but people who may want to build a sustainable business from our technology and the technology of our partners. And as well, community-run events like this one where we can actually share ideas. And so we feel very strongly that we have to have this kind of community approach. Apology for the slide snafu in the beginning. Thanks.
Right, yes, thank you, Kristen. So I would like to check if there are any questions for you. I can't see any hands being raised, but let's see the agenda now. I think there is just a confirmation from Rusty about the need for those kind of initiatives. So if I can't see anything else, I just wanted to check. I just wanted to double check because a couple of speakers that put themselves on the agenda have not been able to join us, I don't think, but I'll just try and see. Please mark it on the agenda if you are here, and I just didn't recognize your name in the control panel. So is Matt Turk here, or perhaps Lawrence Rajendran, or Alex Freeman? Right. Okay. It doesn't appear that that they are with us. So we've overrun by a minute already anyway. So I would like to ask you if you would be able to just fill in the little poll that should have appeared on your screens right now. Yeah. And thank you everybody for joining us. As I might have forgotten to mention in the beginning, but we have been recording this webinar, and we will be sharing the recording and the notes from the webinar. If any of the speakers would like to share their slides that they have used during the presentation, during the call, please do send them to hello@elifesciences.org, and we will make them available as well. I think we can continue the conversation by putting more questions on and comments on the agenda, as well as following that on Twitter with the hashtag OS Soapbox. So thank you again for participating in the call, and I think at this point we are finished, so we'll find out later from the COCO Foundation, who put themselves as volunteers for the next call, on how and when we'll reconvene. Thank you. Bye.